The fourth way. In the ordinary conditions of cultured life, the position of a person, even of an intelligent individual who seeks knowledge, is hopeless. Because in the circumstances surrounding them there is nothing resembling either fakir or yogi schools, whilst the religions of the West have degenerated to such an extent that for a long time there has been nothing alive in them. Various occult and mystical societies, naive experiments in the nature of spiritualism and so on, can yield no result either. The position would therefore appear hopeless if a fourth possibility did not exist. The fourth way requires no retirement into the desert, does not require one to give up and renounce everything by which they formerly lived. The fourth way, however, begins further on than the way of the yogi, which means that a person must be prepared for the fourth way, and this preparation, being acquired in ordinary life, must be a very serious one, embracing many different sides. Furthermore, one has to live in conditions that are favorable to work on the fourth way, or at the very least, in conditions that do not render it impossible. It should be understood that both within the inner and the external life of a person there might be conditions that create insuperable barriers to the fourth way. The fourth way has no definite forms like the ways of the fakir, the monk and the yogi, and then first and foremost, it has to be found. This is the first test, as it is not as widely known as the three traditional ways. There are many people who have never heard of the fourth way, and then there are others who deny its existence or possibilities altogether. In contrast, however, the beginning of the fourth way is easier than the beginning of the ways of the fakir, the monk and the yogi. On the fourth way it is possible to work, and to follow this way whilst remaining in the conditions of everyday life, continuing to do the usual work, preserving former relations with people, and without renouncing or giving up anything. On the contrary, the conditions of life in which a person is placed at the beginning of their work, in which so to speak the work finds them, are the best possible for them. At the beginning of the work, these conditions are natural for them. These conditions are the person themselves, because a person's life and its conditions correspond to what they are. Any conditions different from those created by life would be artificial for them, and in such artificial conditions the work would not be able to touch every side of their being at once. Thanks to this, the fourth way affects simultaneously every side of a person's being. It is work on all the three rooms at once. The fakir works on the first room, the monk on the second, and the yogi on the third. In reaching the fourth room, the ways of the fakir, the monk and the yogi leave behind many things unfinished, and the followers of these ways cannot make use of what they have attained because they are not masters of all their functions. The fakir is master of his body but not of his emotions or his mind. The monk is master of his emotions, but not of his body or his mind. The yogi is master of his mind, but not of his body or his emotions. The fourth way differs from the other ways in that the principal demand made upon a person is the demand for understanding. One must do nothing that they do not understand, except as an experiment under the direction and supervision of their teacher. The more one understands what they are doing, the greater will be the result of their efforts. This is a fundamental principle of the fourth way. The results of work are in proportion to the consciousness of the work. No faith is required on the fourth way. On the contrary, faith of any kind is opposed to the fourth way. On the fourth way, one must satisfy themselves of the truth of what they are told, and until they are satisfied, they must do nothing. The method of the fourth way consists of doing something in one room and simultaneously doing something corresponding to it in the two other rooms, that is to say, whilst working on the physical body, one needs to work simultaneously on the mind and on the emotions. While working on the mind, to work on the physical body and the emotions. While working on the emotions, to work on the mind and the physical body. This can be achieved due to the fact that on the fourth way, it is possible to make use of certain knowledge, inaccessible to the ways of the fakir, the monk and the yogi. This knowledge makes it possible to work in three directions simultaneously. A whole parallel series of physical, mental and emotional exercises serves this purpose. In addition to this, on the fourth way it is possible to individualize the work of each separate person, that is to say, each person can do what is necessary, and not what is useless for them. This is due to the fact that the fourth way dispenses with a great deal of what is superfluous, and preserved simply through culture and tradition in the other ways. So that when a person attains will on the fourth way, they are able to make use of it, because they have acquired control of all their bodily, emotional and intellectual functions. Aside from this, they have saved a great deal of time by working on the three sides of their being in parallel and simultaneously. This is why the fourth way is sometimes called the way of the sly man. The sly man knows some secret that the fakir, the monk and the yogi do not know. How the sly man acquired this secret is not known, however. He may have found it in some old books, perhaps inherited it, he may even have bought it or stolen it from someone. It makes no difference. The sly man knows the secret, and with its help outstrips the fakir, the monk and the yogi in their quest. Of the four, the fakir acts in the crudest manner. He knows very little and understands very little. Suppose for example that by a whole month of intense torture he develops in himself certain energy, a certain substance that produces particular changes in him. He does it absolutely blindly with his eyes shut, knowing neither aim, method nor results, but simply in imitation of others. The monk on the other hand knows what he wants a little better. He is guided by religious feeling, by religious tradition, by a desire for achievement and for salvation. He trusts his teacher who tells him what to do, and he believes that his efforts and sacrifices are pleasing to God. Let us suppose then that a week of fasting, continual prayer, privations and so on, enable him to attain what the fakir develops in himself after a month of self-torture. The yogi knows considerably more. He knows what he wants, he knows why he wants it, and he also knows how it can be acquired. He knows, for example, that it is necessary for his purpose to produce a certain substance in himself. He knows that this substance can be produced in one day by a certain kind of mental exercise or concentration of consciousness. So he keeps his attention on these exercises for the whole day without allowing himself a single outside thought, and obtains what he needs. In this way, a yogi spends on the same thing only one day, compared with a month spent by the fakir and a week spent by the monk. However, on the fourth way, knowledge is still more exact and perfect. A person who follows the fourth way knows quite definitely what substances they need for their aims. They know that these substances can be produced within the body by a month of physical suffering, by a week of emotional strain, or by a day of mental exercises, and that they can also be introduced into the organism from without, if it is known how to do this. Instead of spending the whole day therefore in exercises like the yogi, a week in prayer like the monk, or a month in self-torture like the fakir, they simply prepare and swallow a little pill that contains all the substances they want. In this way, without loss of time, they obtain the required result. It must be further noted that in addition to these proper and legitimate ways, there are artificial ways that can give only temporary results. Then there are wrong ways that may even give permanent results, only the wrong outcomes. On these ways one is also seeking the key to the fourth room, and they sometimes find it. However, what they find in the fourth room is not yet known. It may also happen that the door to the fourth room is opened artificially with a skeleton key. In both these cases, however, the room may prove to be empty. For a person of Western culture, it is of course difficult to believe and accept the idea that an ignorant fakir, a naive monk, or a reclusive yogi that has withdrawn from life may be on the way to evolution. Whilst an educated European, armed with exact knowledge and all the latest methods of investigation, has no chance whatsoever, and is moving in a circle from which there is no escape. This is because people believe in progress and in culture. There is, however, no progress at all, and everything remains the same, as it was thousands and tens of thousands of years ago. Only the outward form changes, the essence does not change, and an individual remains just the same as ever. Civilized and cultured people live with exactly the same interests as the most ignorant barbarian, because modern civilization is based upon violence, slavery and fine rhetoric. All the fine words about progress, development and civilization are simply that, merely words. This can of course produce a particularly deep impression upon us, as was illustrated in the 1916 and 1945 manifestations of civilization, such as the world has never before or since seen, which drew millions and millions of people into its orbit. People are machines, and machines have to be blind and unconscious, they cannot be otherwise, and all of these actions have to correspond to their nature. Everything simply happens, no one does anything. Progress and civilization in the real meaning of these words can appear only as the result of conscious effort. They cannot appear as the result of unconscious mechanical action, and what conscious effort can there be in machinery? If one machine is unconscious, then 100 machines are unconscious, and so are 1,000 machines, 100,000, 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000. The unconscious result of 1,000,000 machines must necessarily result in destruction and extermination. It is precisely in unconscious, involuntary manifestations that all evil lies. We cannot understand and even begin to imagine all of the consequences of this evil. The time will come, however, when we shall understand. It is the greatest mistake to think that man is always one and the same. A person is never the same for long. They are continually changing and seldom remain the same, even for half an hour. We think that if a man is called Peter, then he is always Peter. Nothing of the kind. Now he is Peter, in another minute he becomes Paul, and a minute later he is John, Bernard, Alexander, Simon, and so on. We all, however, look at him and think that he is Peter. We know, for example, that Peter cannot do a certain thing. Suppose that he cannot tell a lie. Then we find that he has told a lie and are surprised he could have done so. Indeed, Peter cannot tell a lie, it is Paul who lied, and when the opportunity presents itself, Paul cannot help lying. You will be astonished when you realize what a multitude of these Peters and Pauls live within one man. If you learn to observe them, there is no need to watch a video, or even go to the cinema for entertainment. The question then arises whether this has anything to do with the consciousness of separate organs of the body. We can often feel the reality of these consciousnesses and sense that not only separate organs, but every part of the body having separate functions can have a separate consciousness. The right hand has one consciousness and the left another. The skin can blush and react unconsciously without our being aware of it. The hairs on our arm can rise, our eye can twitch, and so on. These consciousnesses undoubtedly exist and are comparatively harmless. Each of them knows its own place and its own business. The hands know they must work, the feet must walk, and the chest will rise and fall. However, these Peters and Pauls are different. They all call themselves I. That is, they consider themselves masters and none wants to recognize another. Each of them is caliph for an hour, does what he likes regardless of everything, and later on, the others have to pay for it. There is no order among them whatever. Whoever gets the upper hand is master, he whips everyone on all sides and takes heed of nothing. But the next moment another seizes the whip and beats him, and so it goes on all one's life. Imagine a country where everyone could be king for 5 minutes, and do during these 5 minutes just what he liked with the whole kingdom. This is our life. Then the fact that person can have several bodies must be understood as an idea, as a principle. However, it does not apply to us. We know that we have the one physical body and we know nothing else, therefore it is the physical body that we have to study. Only we must remember that the analysis is not limited to the physical body, that there are people who may have 2, 3 or even more bodies. However, this should make no difference to us personally, either one way or another. Someone like Bill Gates of Microsoft, for example, may have many millions or even billions of dollars, but his millions do not help me if I have nothing to eat. It is the same thing in this regard, and everyone must think of themselves. It is useless and senseless to rely on others, or to console oneself with thoughts of what others possess. A hungry man cannot think of a banquet to fill his empty stomach. Is it possible to know, however, whether another has, for example, an astral body? There are definite ways of knowing this, and under certain conditions the astral body can be seen. It can be separated from the physical body and even photographed at the side of the physical body. The existence of the astral body, however, can more easily and simply be established by its functions. The astral body has definite functions that the physical body cannot have, and the presence of these functions indicates the presence of an astral body. The absence of these functions obviously shows the absence of the astral body. However, it is too early to examine this, and our attention must therefore be concentrated on the study of the physical body for the moment. To do this, it is necessary to understand the structure of the human machine. Our principal error is that we think that we have one mind. We call the function of this mind conscious, and everything that does not enter this mind we call unconscious or subconscious. In this assumption lies our chief error. Of the conscious and the unconscious we will speak later, but at the present need to observe the activity of the human machine and note that the physical body is controlled not by one but by several minds. Entirely independent of one another, having separate functions and separate spheres in which they manifest themselves. These minds, known as centers, need to be understood first, otherwise nothing else that follows will make any sense at all. The evolution of man can be taken as the development in him of those possibilities and powers that never develop by themselves, that is, mechanically. Only this kind of development, only this kind of growth, marks the real evolution of man. There is and there can be no other kind of evolution. We have before us man at the present moment of his development. Nature has made him such as he is and in large masses, and so far as we can see, such he will remain. Changes likely to violate the general requirements of nature only take place in separate units. In order to understand the law of a person's evolution, it is important to grasp that beyond a certain point, this evolution is not necessary at all. That is to say, it is not necessary for nature at a given moment in its own development. To speak more precisely, the evolution of mankind corresponds to the evolution of the planets, however the evolution of the planets proceeds for us in infinitely prolonged cycles of time. Throughout the stretch of time that human thought can embrace, no essential changes can take place in the life of the planets, and consequently no essential changes can take place in the life of mankind. Humanity neither progresses nor evolves. What seems to us to be progress or evolution is a partial modification that can immediately be counterbalanced by a corresponding modification in an opposite direction. Humanity, like the rest of organic life, exists on Earth for the needs and purposes of the Earth, and it is exactly as it should be for the Earth's requirements at the present time. Only thought, as theoretical and as far removed from fact as Western thought, could have conceived the evolution of man to be possible apart from surrounding nature, or have regarded the evolution of man as a gradual conquest of nature, which is quite impossible. In living, in dying, in evolving and in degenerating, man equally serves the purposes of nature, or rather nature makes equal use, though perhaps for different purposes of the products of both evolution and degeneration. At the same time, humanity as a whole can never escape from nature, for even in struggling against nature man acts in conformity with her purposes. The evolution of large masses of humanity is opposed to nature's purpose. The evolution of a certain small percentage may however be in accord with nature's purposes. Man contains within him the possibility of evolution. However, the evolution of humanity as a whole, that is the development of these possibilities in all people, or in most of them, or even in a large number of them, is not necessary for the purposes of the earth, or of the planetary world in general. It might in fact be injurious or fatal. There exist therefore special forces of a planetary nature that oppose the evolution of large masses of humanity, and keep it at the level it ought to be. For example, the evolution of humanity beyond a certain point, or to speak more correctly, above a certain percentage, would be fatal for the moon. The moon at present feeds upon organic life, on humanity. Humanity is a part of organic life, and this means that humanity is food for the moon. If all of mankind were to become too intelligent, then they would not want to be eaten by the moon. At the same time, however, possibilities of evolution exist, and they may be developed in separate individuals with the help of appropriate knowledge and methods. Such development can take place only in the interests of the individual themselves, against, so to speak, the interests or forces of the planetary world. We must understand this. Our evolution is necessary only to ourselves, no one else is interested in it, and no one is obliged or intends to help us. On the contrary, the forces that oppose the evolution of large masses of humanity also oppose the evolution of individuals, therefore one must outwit them. One person can outwit them, however humanity cannot. We will assess later why all of these obstacles are very useful to us, as if they did not exist they would have to be created intentionally, because it is only by overcoming obstacles that we develop those qualities that we need. This is the basis of the correct view of human evolution, and we must understand that there is no compulsory or mechanical evolution. Evolution is the result of conscious struggle. Nature does not need this evolution. On the contrary, it does not want it and struggles against it. Evolution can be necessary only to man himself when he realizes his position, realizes the possibility of changing this position, realizes that he has powers that he does not use, and riches that he does not see. In the sense of gaining possession of these powers and riches, evolution is possible. However, if all people, or most of them, realized this and desired to obtain what belongs to them by right of birth, then evolution would again become impossible. What is possible for individuals is impossible for the masses. The advantage of the separate individual is that we are very small, and that in the economy of nature, it makes no difference whether there is one mechanical individual more or less. We can easily understand this correlation of magnitudes if we imagine the correlation between a microscopic cell and our own body. The presence or absence of one cell will change nothing in the life of the body. We cannot be conscious of it, and it can have no influence on the life and functions of the organism. In exactly the same way, a separate individual is too small to influence the life of the cosmic organism to which they stand in the same relation, with regard to size, as a cell stands to our own organism. This is precisely what makes our evolution possible, and upon this are based all possibilities. In speaking of evolution, it is necessary to understand from the outset that no mechanical evolution is possible. The evolution of humankind is the evolution of its consciousness, and consciousness cannot evolve unconsciously. The evolution of the individual is the evolution of their will, and will cannot evolve involuntarily. The evolution of a person is their power of doing, and doing cannot be the result of things that just happen. People do not know what man is. They have to do things with a very complex machine, far more complex than any air or spacecraft, any computer or any scientific instrument. However, they know nothing or almost nothing about the construction, working or possibilities of this machine. They do not even understand its simplest functions, because they do not know the purpose of these functions. They vaguely imagine that a person should learn to control their machine, just as they have to learn to control an automobile, an airplane or a spacecraft, and that incompetent handling of the human machine is just as dangerous as incompetent handling of any other complex mechanism. Everyone understands this in relation to a motor vehicle, an airplane or a spacecraft, but it is very rarely that anyone takes this into account with relation to a person in general, or to themselves in particular. It is considered instead right and legitimate to think that nature has given us all the necessary knowledge of our machine, and yet we understand that an instinctive knowledge of any machine is by no means enough. Why do we study medicine and make use of its services? Because we realize that we do not know our machine, but do not suspect that it can be known far better than science knows it. We do not suspect that then, it would be possible to get quite different work out of it.